Lately, it seems like everyone you know has been buying a home, right? I know so many people who have bought a home in the last year, including myself. We bought one last summer. We love it. But I think it's important to chat with people who you haven't yet bought to better understand maybe there's some pros to actually holding off for a bit instead of feeling like you have to jump in. So, we have a fellow Wealthfront employee here, Elly, as part of our comms team. We're gonna be talking about how renting might actually be better than buying in certain situations. All right, Elly, you haven't bought a home yet.
That is right.
You're renting in San Francisco.
That is right.
How's that going, and how do you feel about the fact that it seems like everyone's trying to buy a home over the last year?
Yeah, it does seem like literally every single person I know has either just bought a home, thinking about buying a home. But I'm happy that I'm not part of that wave yet. I think, especially, I love living in San Francisco, and it's a super high cost of living city, especially with the real estate market going crazy.
Yeah.
And so right now, my rent is very reasonable, and if I went and bought the same apartment that I live in, my monthly payment could actually double. And that would be insane considering what I'm saving and able to invest right now. So that makes me very happy that I'm having a low monthly payment.
Low, okay.
Compared to a mortgage. The other thing is just flexibility. I don't know exactly where I'll want to be in a couple years, and I know at Wealthfront we say you should probably buy a house that you'll plan to stay in for 5 years. And I know we can discuss if that's why you bought your house. But for me, I have no idea where I want to be in 5 years. So that feels kind of stressful to say I'm buying something and I don't know if I'll still want to be there. So there's the flexibility, the cost. For me, if the light breaks, if the dishwasher breaks, I don't have to worry about that. The landlord just comes on in, fixes it up. Obviously there are downsides. Can't have a dog. Would love to have a dog.
Mm-hmm.
But right now, flexibility and price are really important to me. And if I want to stay in San Francisco, it's going to be hard to buy in the same neighborhood right now.
Don't you worry that if you wait and you don't jump in on the buying, that everyone's
Craze.
going in, the buying craze that everyone's getting in on, that you're going to miss out because home values are just going to keep going up, right?
I mean, I definitely do worry about that, but at the same time, I feel like it's the same as trying to time the market, trying to time investing market, trying to time the housing market. You just don't know. You don't know what's going to happen. So I'm more I just want to save a lot. So if I do want to buy, that I'm ready, and just hope that the market that I buy in San Francisco will continue to do well over a long period of time. It's, if you're getting too I can get in on some Zillow, but if you're spending too much time with the ups and downs of every price, I feel like that's more stress than thinking about, this would be a great next milestone. I don't want that to take away from it.
Okay, so you mentioned that you're saving up for a potential home.
Mm-hmm.
How do you even know, where do you start to understand about how much to actually save?
Yeah.
Right, for the down payment or future costs? And then are there any tools that you're using that maybe other people might benefit from?
Yeah, so I think for me, I'm focused on just saving as much as possible. And I became pretty frugal over the pandemic. I think a lot of us have. And so I've just kind of tried to keep that going and just put as much into saving and investing as possible. But I definitely am was not super aware of all the other costs that go into buying a home until I started using the Wealthfront home planning tool, because that I was blown away that in addition to mortgage, there's also closing costs, there's maintenance costs, there's taxes, there's so much stuff. So that has definitely helped me figure out what those additional costs could look like, because when you're on Zillow, you're only seeing I guess you're only seeing the mortgage costs, but you're not seeing all those all-in costs. So that's definitely something that I use to see what could I afford in a certain area. And of course, it's fun to put in different zip codes and see what else is out there.
Yes, it is.
Okay, so renting, you don't need to do maintenance costs.
Right.
There's a security deposit when you move in, but that's pretty minimal compared to housing closing costs. So were you surprised by those? Did you save up for those additional costs separately, or were you really focused on the down payment?
I used the Wealthfront home planning tool, and it was great. And it told me what my all-in cost would be. But then when I went to buy the home, we still did the calculation, which was we wanted to put 20% down as our down payment. We forgot to account for the other 5-10% in closing costs, and then
10%.
Potentially up to 10%, right? Depending on where you actually buy a home. And the one thing about some of those costs is they don't happen. You don't know about them until the last day when you're going to basically send your large wire to the title company.
Oh, wow.
To own that home. And all of a sudden you see this breakdown, and it's like all these 10, 20 different costs. And so I called the title company and I was like, what are all these costs involved in? And the majority of them are paying for like fees, title company fees. However, some of them are actually prepaying for your interest, for instance. For a few months your interest. The bank sometimes requires you to pay up front for that.
Okay.
You potentially have to pay up front for property taxes. So a lot of these all-in costs include things that you're going to have to pay for eventually. So what I'd suggest is you take that 20% number and then take about 10% of the overall cost of the home, add that to your savings as well, just to have that ready to go. Because if we didn't have that, it would have potentially delayed us in buying that home.
Dang.
When you're renting, you don't have to worry about all those miscellaneous costs. Like something breaks, or in terms of just acquiring that apartment to rent in, there's the security deposit, there's your first month rental, and that's it.
Yeah.
So it's very different when you finalize buying a home versus finalize maybe signing that rental agreement. If simplicity is something that you might want and you don't want to have to deal with all these random costs going for these large costs, renting can definitely be better than buying in that situation.
Yeah.
So you go and buy the home and you send all your life savings to the title company. And you say, okay, and then you send more of your life savings as part of the closing costs, and you say, it has to stop here, right?
Yeah.
And you move in, and then a few months later you get a bill in the mail from the treasurer of that city or the treasurer of the state asking you to pay property taxes. And then obviously when you buy a home, the property taxes are assessed based on the new value of the home, not the value of the home before you bought it, but right when you move in, they kind of give a property assessment value. And you know that you're going to have to pay property taxes. And this is assuming that the bank does not require you to put your property taxes in escrow. Sometimes you have to actually pay your property taxes each month to the bank, and then they pay it for you.
Okay.
This is assuming that you don't do that. A lump sum is due within a few months. So
For like the whole year?
Usually 6 months.
Oh, okay.
So usually you pay 6 months at a time. But what surprised me was that it was due like a few months after we moved in.
Damn.
And they, there's not much, it's not really technology advance per se in California. So even just trying to pay took like multiple times, refreshing new incognito windows on Chrome.
Oh my God.
So like, besides the annoyingness of it, it just comes as a surprise that you also have to prepare for that.
Yeah.
I don't think a lot of new homeowners do that. And that, I think the old saying goes that you want to buy a home if you know where you're going to be in the next 5 years. I think some of that may have changed with the pandemic in the sense that we felt like if we bought a home and then a year later we had to move somewhere else, back to the Bay Area or some other city for our work or something, we still wanted to own something. And we knew that we could rent somewhere else and likely rent out our home to make the mortgage back.
Yeah.
And once we came to that conclusion and we felt pretty safe with that, then it happened within a few days. And I think I've talked to other people who buy a home, and they say the same thing, that it isn't always this like long, drawn out, open houses every weekend, and 6 months later all of a sudden you find the right one. Sometimes it takes just an overnight like, yeah, it's the right time. And then you wake up the next day and the right home falls in your lap. And that's what happened with us. All right. So I think that was a great discussion and kind of going back and forth. I think what we found is when you own a home, you sometimes wish you rented. And when you rent, you actually probably think about buying more so than renting. So it goes both ways. I think in the end, owning a home is great. I think buying a home, something to call your home, is typically the largest expense most people ever have. But I think what we got from this conversation is renting is fine, and honestly, it might make sense for a lot of people, especially in their younger years, before you have a family, before you have to worry about that. Renting's totally fine.
Yeah.
It can be less costly.
Don't have to feel pressure by the buying craze.
Don't feel pressured by the buying craze. Thanks again for joining in. Please subscribe to our channel. We'll be coming out with content pretty much every week going forward. We'd love to talk about things that we think our clients, potential clients, current clients, everyone in kind of around our age, right? 20s and 30s and 40s can really value from. So I hope you enjoyed today's discussion. Once again, this is Tony from Wealthfront. We'll see you again. Take care.